Welcome to the Simply His Coffee Shop. We have a really powerful show that I think will touch a lot of people. We have a very special guest that we met. She actually brings a ministry out to the ranch at Whispering Ponies Ranch, and Mom has introduced her to me, and her story is incredible, and her ministry is fascinating. And so we thought, what better way than to have her on our show and tell you guys, because we think that you will all be blessed as well. Please help me welcome Jennifer.
Hey, thank you.
Yeah, we're very excited to have you today. And her ministry is called You Are Worthy Ministry. And I know that we'll get into where that name came from and everything. So I'm very excited for these shows. I think many people will be very touched by what your testimony is and what your ministry is, because I think the ministry that you have is so important for people with the restoration, and
very needed.
Very, very needed. Anyway, so let's just jump right in. So tell us a little bit about you and your testimony and how you got started in life.
Well, I'd love to. I love talking about Jesus, and I'm so grateful to be here with you ladies. My journey started as a young child growing up in a home that was not Christian. It had a lot of abuse, a lot of struggles, a lot of chaos, all the things that come with that. And so with that, I lived in America, but had never heard the gospel. And by the time I was 4 years old, my eyes opened to the spirit realm. And just right off the bat, I saw what I called creatures, because I didn't have names for them, and how they interacted with people around me.
Well, and as a child, you probably didn't really have another way to call them anything else.
No.
Right.
No, I had experienced a lot of abuse, a lot of sickness, a lot of just crazy by that point, by even 4 years old, and abuse of every kind. And so, but did not have a grid for the Christian worldview on anything. So what I saw were these things that when people talked, they were repeating what these things said in my world. And when people did things, they were moving almost like puppets. And instantly I realized that these creatures were the things that were in charge of a lot of people.
Right.
And so that was comforting on one hand, because when people said, "I love you," that wasn't coming from the creatures. But at the same time, I also realized they were more in charge than most people understood. And so for the first couple of years following that, between 4 to 6, I just watched. Honestly, I grew in arrogance and pride, and like, I must be pretty cool because I know what's happening that other people don't. Yeah. And coming from a background of abuse, it helped me feel empowered. And so around that time of about 6 years old is the first time I remember actually deciding that I was going to, on my own, tell these creatures what to do. And so I wanted a cookie. And I had been malnourished and hungry and all those things. And so I asked them to help me go get a cookie without getting caught. And somehow I was able to walk right past people in my family, and they didn't see me, and I got my cookie. Wow. And I was all in it at that point. So even though I'd experienced training coming from a background, even at 6 years old, of being in the occult and those kind of things, this was the first point that I realized, oh, this could work for me.
Right. This could help me out.
Right. This could go in my favor rather than the way it's been going. So from 6 to 8, I just explored that, navigated, and it seemed to work really well for me, actually. And I don't say that like, oh, that's cool, but I was really deceived in believing these things were helping me, and that you
were a child.
Yes.
How would you know any different? Especially coming from abuse, you're trying to gather all of these things and information and figure out, okay, they're helping me, so it must be good.
It must be good. At least it's good for me, and that was good enough. So at 8 years old, though, I was ended up inviting or invoking, depending on the term you want to use, a spirit because I wanted something bigger. I wanted something more powerful. I wanted to grow in the position I was in. and a spirit appeared. I called it forth out of a bathroom mirror, and it came out, and first thing it said to me was, I've known you since before you were born, and I've been following you, and I'm going to kill you. But
Wow.
not until I make you watch everyone you love die.
And you were 8 years old.
8 years old.
How did you know how to even conjure this?
I had actually gone to a slumber party, and they were playing a game. And they thought it was a game, and I knew that it was not a game. I knew enough about the occult to know I'm not doing this here, but I'm going to go home, and this is going to be a next level for me, or maybe jump a few levels even. Again, just very deceived, really thought, gosh, this will be great. And when that thing came out at me, it was suddenly not great. Everything changed, and I immediately went into terror, panic. I had trouble going to the bathroom by myself for 6 months.
Oh, man.
And I was convinced that everything this thing had said was true, like down to, I say, to my bone marrow, because it was more real than I was as far as I was concerned. So I gave my life to it and said, I'll do whatever you tell me to do. I will whatever to protect my family, to delay what you have sworn to do.
Right.
To make me watch them die and to kill me. And so what for the first couple of years seemed like a power giving experience quickly turned against me.
Right.
And in my understanding, that's pretty well how darkness works. It looks really shiny in the beginning until it's not. And so my life really went chaotically downhill even more. The abuse increased, the sickness increased. By the time I was in my early teens, I started self-medicating with alcohol pretty significantly.
Wow.
Was full-blown alcoholism by the time I was 14 years old.
Wow.
By the time I was 17, I had had my stomach pumped 6 times.
Oh, my goodness.
I was diabetic. I had an eating disorder. I was a train wreck, to say the least. And so as things continued to get messier and messier at home, as my personal state of mind began to deteriorate more and more, I just became more and more that puppet that I had judged others for being as I was a younger child. And so now I was the one doing what they were doing and saying
And
what
doing
they
what
were
they
saying.
were telling you to say.
Yes, absolutely.
Could you kind of still see and feel that that's what you were doing?
100%. I was aware. So I didn't see angels. I've often gone to the Lord and gone, an angel here and there might have been helpful. But he knows best. And so at that time, I only saw in the demonic. At about 15, I started a quest for truth and just started researching different faiths, because what I was experiencing didn't seem to be explainable by all the normal answers of people around me, even the training that I was experiencing in the occult at that point. And so I researched faiths from all over the world. I love to learn, love to study, and nothing just seemed to answer this ever-growing list of questions of things I was experiencing. I looked at the Bible and I was like, doesn't make sense to me. Why would people read this? It was foolishness to me, as the word clearly says it would be. And I researched all the major faiths, tribal religions, New Age, crystals, everything.
Right.
And as my questions grew based on my experiences, I just couldn't lock into anything that seemed to be giving me the answers I needed. So I just made a vow and said, when I find truth, I'm going to give my whole life to it. Whatever it is, it doesn't matter. I'll give my whole life. Well, the life I had anyway was a mess. So by the time I hit 17, I had been really pushed by my family to get pregnant for about 2.5 years and have a child. And they were very upset that I refused to do this. I didn't want to have a baby with anyone I was not married to. I was dating my then stepbrother, who's 8 years older than myself. So clearly not in a healthy, balanced relationship or life. But I was just adamant. I'm not going to have a baby with someone that I'm not married to. And at 17, I had a huge cyst on my ovary rupture, and they wanted to do a full hysterectomy. And,
Wow. That's a lot for a
That's scary.
17-year-old.
yeah. And so we came home from the hospital and we had a family meeting. And it was, you have got to get pregnant and quit messing around because we can't approve the surgery until you do.
So what was the reason that they thought you needed to have a baby?
You know, that was never told to me overtly. I believe because I'm adopted and most likely my biological bloodlines were important for the occult. That, and just based on research I've done and information gathered, that's my best understanding at this point. A lot of that is really shrouded because I had to cut off relationship
Sure.
and just
Absolutely.
don't have answers.
No,
So
that seems to make sense.
That
that's
would
the
make
only
sense.
thing that makes sense why you would push a 15-year-old
No kidding.
into having a baby and with someone that you've chosen that
Right.
is their stepbrother. This was several years of pursuit, not one conversation, leaving me in different parts of the town and saying, don't come back unless you get pregnant, those kind of things. So it was pretty
wow.
dramatic, the efforts taken. So by 17, I'm sitting there and they're like, you have to have a baby. Like, hurry
Right.
up and do the things. And I would love to say I had this heart of purity about marriage, but
Right.
that wasn't it. But I was really good at being stubborn. And I had
Were you on
said-
any kind of birth control or
no,
anything?
no,
But
nothing.
you never got pregnant?
No. And so I'm not doing this until. And so finally at the family meeting, my mom, who was raising me, walked down the hall, went and got a ring, came back and said, we'll put this on. Now you're engaged. Go take care of things. And so at that point, I'm in a whirlwind engagement, going to get married. And I'm spending more time at my 25-year-old boyfriend's house and drinking a lot in response to this. So I was
Right.
blacking out. I was struggling with all these things. And one night I was 87 pounds, little short person, very underweight, eating disorder, and drank a whole bottle of Malibu rum. And
Oh my goodness.
so all the things that come with that when you get into, it's really alcohol poisoning at
Oh,
that
yeah,
point.
absolutely.
We're past drunkenness a long time ago. And I was in the bathroom really sick, needing an ambulance. And I turned and looked in the mirror and just briefly caught a glimpse of myself, like a real,
Like truly saw yourself.
and it was not good. It was really not good. And from that place, just in an instant, I heard a voice, and it was different from the other voices. And it said, if he loves you enough to call you his wife, shouldn't you love him enough to be the wife he deserves? And I had created this relationship with my stepbrother where, of course, we're going to be in love. We're married now. So I'll just create the world that I want to live in.
Sure.
And those words calling me to love shook me. And instantly, I was sober. Instantly, the desire for alcohol, for drunkenness, I didn't go through a detox. I didn't anything. It was like 1 minute, you need to be in the hospital. The next minute, you're done.
So it was a miracle, literally.
A literal miracle. Saved my life without question.
So you were just
Yes.
healed of alcoholism.
Yes. So in that moment, hearing that voice, it was such a dramatic encounter. Absolute miracle. I recognize that.
Sure.
But I was like, oh, okay, now I'll just love. And I went along about my way. Foolishly did not ask, what was that voice? What just
Right.
happened?
Who did
Why
it
did
come
it just
from?
happen?
Right.
Why are you speaking to me? Why are you so different? I look back, I have no idea why I didn't ask those questions. But what I know is it saved my life in that moment.
Right.
And I'm confident it was the Lord's voice now, but it wasn't enough to save me.
Right.
And that became very important later in my journey. As things from that moment, you would think, okay, alcohol's out of the way. Maybe you can think more clearly. Maybe you cannot act a fool. Get your head on straight. But the enemy doesn't work that way. He just comes in another direction.
Sure.
And
he wants to twist it.
Yeah.
Constantly twist the truth.
Oh my goodness. Yes. So moved forward, got married at 18, right after I turned 18. And then I was like, now, can we just move past this and have a baby already? And so became pregnant pretty quickly. And 5 months into the pregnancy, we discovered that the baby had passed away in utero unexpectedly. And so I was in a doctor's office. They said, go home, you'll go into labor naturally, and then you can come back to the hospital. And so as I walked out of the doctor's office, I was walking down the sidewalk, just regular hospital sidewalk, but out of what felt like nowhere, this horde of demons just came at me. It was like a cloud is the best way I can describe it, but just filled with all these different things. And at the center of it was that same entity I had seen at 8 years old. And they were just screaming, hollering. It was just the most terrifying thing I'd ever seen. And in that moment, that same entity said, I told you I'm going to kill you. I told you I'm following you. And now not only are you going to watch the people you love die, but you carry dead bodies inside of you. And I just hit the pavement screaming. Just truly had a mental breakdown.
A psychotic break.
Yeah, absolutely. My then husband picked me up, carried me to the car, kind of took my mess and put it in the car, wheelbarrow style.
Yeah.
Took me home. They ended up getting a hold of the doctor. I went back to the hospital, delivered the baby. They had to medicate me on different psychiatric meds to get me calm and sedated. And I went home with multiple diagnoses of all different kinds, and
I'm sure.
Just in complete despair.
Did they admit you into like the psych ward for a while?
Yeah.
Then?
And to get me stabilized.
Well, it's traumatic enough anyways to lose a baby.
Yeah. Right.
And then to have that on top of it, that
Yeah, no kidding.
anybody would have lost their mind at that point,
absolutely.
I think.
It was just too much. And with that started coming a flood of memories from my childhood. So all these things just coming up. And so started seeking help from different sources, got all kinds of, again, diagnosis, mental health labels that were necessary and appropriate at the time, for sure. And in that place, just began to live a very isolated, secluded life. I could not handle when I was home being around people or stimulus because the demonic torment was so great. So I would spend my days in my bathtub, fully dressed, lights off. And my ex-husband would put me in the morning, feed me breakfast, put me in the morning, come home at lunch, pull me out, feed me lunch, put me back in until he was home in the evening. And any stimulus, including light, at that point just felt so overwhelming to deal with in addition to all the demonic things that I was seeing and hearing. And so this went on for several months, and then I became pregnant again because it was still my job to have a baby. And so I carried that pregnancy. It was a difficult one, but we made it all the way to term. And my amazing daughter was born, and she was the first blood relative that I knew I was like biologically connected to, that I had ever had held or been close to. She was perfect. Her name is Catherine. So she was pure in every way, and it terrified me, because she was so wonderful. And here this love that I'd heard about so many years before, was surging through me. And the last thing I wanted to do was not have anything real to give her.
Right.
Just so compelled truly by this love, and just terrified that I didn't have anything I wanted her to build her life on that I knew.
Right.
And so I took her home. I couldn't believe they let me take her home. I was like waiting for someone to say, this isn't okay.
Wow.
But I took her home, and it pulled me out of the bathtub. Love does amazing things. It truly is the one thing that never fails. Yeah. It pulled me out of the bathtub. It pulled me out of the psychosis. Was not healthy. Don't be fooled in that, but I was not anywhere near where I've been.
Right.
And over the next couple of years, it accelerated this quest for truth, because she was going to grow up and ask me questions.
Right.
I needed to teach her things.
You needed to tell her.
I didn't know anything I wanted her to know. I didn't have a life I wanted her to duplicate. So in that quest, as I'm reading, studying more, I was given a book of a Christian fiction series. And one night because it was a book to read, I sat down to read it in my bedroom. And she was 2 years old at that point, and I was 22. And I'm sitting there, get a couple of pages in, and this presence comes in the room. And I did not see, like I saw the demonic in that moment. First I felt, and it was a wave of love that came crashing over me. I mean, just stunning, shocking tsunami love, followed by perfection and wonder and beauty, and then more love, and it just crashing. I'm immediately face first on the floor. I know it's Jesus. He didn't need to introduce himself. He didn't need to even speak at that point. His presence was enough. I knew the King of Kings was there. And I just landed face first in my floor, just weeping, sobbing at everything he was and how far I was from that. And then I began to hear his voice. And he said, I've known you since before you were born.
I love it so much.
And I've been with you every day of your life. And I'm not going to kill you. I'm the life inside of you. I'm not going to make you watch those you love die.
So he's refuting.
Yes, on every account. And just from then forward, he begins to show me in my mind's eye. It was like watching a movie of different moments in my life, of moments I had been mostly outside, honestly. Like Romans 1 talks about all creation testifies, and every man's without excuse. Well, as I was growing up, I would find comfort going outside and sitting on deer moss when I was hurting from the abuse physically, or looking out at an expanse of the mountains and the lake in Switzerland when we were there doing all kinds of things that nobody should be doing. And I would see this beauty and just be in awe, and the breeze would come and it would wash away and dry my tears on my face. And it was like scene after scene after scene playing just before my mind's eye, like just a slideshow. And as it's playing, he says, there are things you've done and things that have been done to you that have kept you from knowing me and realizing I was there. And from that place, he began to explain the cross. And he said, and I'm not okay with that. And I've never been okay with that. And so I want you to know this is what I did to fix that. And if you, from here, want me, I will always be here with you in a way that you are aware of. So he didn't say, I'll always be with you from here. This is very important, because he had already always been with me.
Right.
But he's like, you're never going to not know I'm here anymore. And I just 3 hours on that floor of this kind of dialogue, understanding, weeping, confessing. And I came up off that floor. I was still a mess. I had a lot more to work through.
Oh, of course.
But I was his mess.
Yeah.
And no one else's. And that entity that had claimed ownership over me, that I'd given myself to for so long at that point, no longer was my Lord or my God. And then secondly, I realized that through everything he shared, he never answered one of my questions. Not that time. Later we got to questions, but never, and I didn't even think of them. And I got off the floor and I thought, I didn't ask the questions. And instantly in my heart, but I said, but truth is a person, not an answer.
Yeah.
Oh, he says, I am the truth, the way, and the life.
Yeah.
Yes.
I love it.
Yeah. So he's a person, not an answer to a single question or even a list of questions
Right.
that were important later for me to work through and understand. But it was him that I needed.
You
answer.
needed him as
He was
the
the
answer.
Absolutely.
Yes. Yes.
Wow.
So everything changed at that time at 22 years old. My life has never been the same. That doesn't mean it all sorted itself out really
Of course,
quickly.
sure.
We
though.
still live on a fallen planet,
Right,
and we're still
exactly.
humans.
Still definitely human, still saw in the spirit, still do see in the spirit, still had to address the agreements, alignments, the covenants that I had made with darkness. Not all of them, but just had to work through the parts that were going to block relationship with him. I had to address the sin I had walked in and my ownership. Yes, I was a victim, but yes, the cross had always been there. And I was without excuse because he had been revealing himself to me through creation. And there wasn't an accusation or shame in that, but teach me what it means to be yours.
Right.
And so one of the things he taught me just very early on, he said, if I haven't taught it to you, lay it down and let me teach it. Because anything taught outside of relationship will harm you. And so, Lord, what does it mean to be a human? What does it mean to be a mom? What does it mean to be a wife, a friend, a sister, everything? And just kept coming to him going, how do you do this? How do you do this? And very quickly, he led me to connect with a church that was local to my area, within a week. And I will say I was everything that a church would put on a poster for evangelism. I was hungry for Jesus. I had been so lost, so broken, so needy, so desperate, so eager, so zealous. And then all the things you hope never walks in your building.
Right.
I didn't know not to gossip. I didn't know not to question. I didn't know church etiquette. I was confused why everybody was called John and Mary. Like, can we not get a little more diverse so we can figure this out? And those questions were the easy ones that came later. But I didn't know there were denominations.
Right.
I didn't know that Christian just didn't mean follower of Christ. I didn't understand the difference between a Baptist or a Pentecostal or a charismatic. So I had a lot to learn and a lot of messes to make along the way. So as I came into the church, they sort of celebrated when I got there. And
Sort of celebrated.
yeah, like, yay.
That's ironic.
Because I didn't know that you weren't supposed to walk in and say, when Jesus came in my bedroom, and start there as your introductory statement.
Right.
And then when people say, do you hear voices? And you go, yeah, but it's different. His is different.
Oh. They probably didn't know what to do with that.
No. And so I had a lot of really difficult experiences in the church world in my
of course.
early
That
years.
was probably a shock.
A shock
of
to
itself.
them and a shock for me.
Right.
Because I'm just here, just tell me what to do.
Right.
And so they'd say, read the word. And I go, okay, I'll read it. And I'd say, okay, Jesus said he'd never leave me. That's good. But one of my early questions was, does that mean that I have missed him in all my past lives? I believed in reincarnation. I didn't understand. So am I going to have to find him again when I come back?
Oh, wow.
If he doesn't leave? I had questions like that.
Sure. Which would be legitimate, especially from your background,
Right.
not knowing anything
Right.
about the word of God or the message or any of that.
No. So lots of messiness, but the Lord was true in his faithfulness. He took me into a church that didn't necessarily believe in the supernatural or the spiritual, particularly darkness, and didn't necessarily recognize the voice of God. Very kind people. And so I made tons of messes for them. They believed in demons when I left, for sure, because I was full of them. And my first deliverance was 9 hours, and I wound up in the hospital afterwards.
Wow.
And so through this experience, I saw the church really wanted to help me, some of them. Some of them just wanted me to leave.
Right.
And the ones that really wanted to help didn't have any skill set to do that. And the ones that were really willing to try would show up for a time and then get really scared.
Sure.
Because, I mean, I scared myself, so why wouldn't I scare somebody else?
Yeah,
Right. Well, I find it interesting, though, too, that you stayed even through all of that confusion. And yes, they wanted to help you, but they didn't know how to help you and how you even stayed, because so many people, they just like, oh, well, they're not helping me. Oh, well, they're talking down to me, or, oh, they don't want me here. And all of those emotions in themselves would have a lot of people saying, oh, well, I tried it. It didn't work for me.
Right.
Well,
You know?
Jesus was the only thing that had worked at that point, so I wasn't leaving him. And he was like, this is where I brought you.
Okay.
And so I was committed to walk in what he asked, because I had understood lordship in the demonic.
Right.
In a way that we don't always teach in the church.
Gotcha.
You will follow and obey.
Yeah.
And I got what that meant. So when I converted
You knew what
out of the
that
kingdom
meant.
of darkness into the kingdom of the beloved Son, I was going to follow and obey. And it doesn't mean that I never went, oh, my word, I would like to leave. Sure, there were moments like that. I didn't like being called out from a platform, but he said, stay. And so for years, as I also didn't know that other churches believed different.
Right.
Honestly, because
Just
I
thought
didn't
they
know
were all the
denominations.
same.
Yeah.
Right.
So where else are you going to go? He says here. So many years later, as I was reflecting back and was kind of going through and going, why in the world, Lord? Like, there are clearly people that know what to do with deliverance and healing. And I would have been a handful for anyone, but really a handful for those without those skill sets. And so I sought him for several years over that. And at one point, I felt like, shared with me that if I had taken you into a place that was familiar with those things, they would have immediately put you on a platform and handed you a microphone.
Right.
You had a powerful story, and it would have destroyed you.
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah. So it was better for me that he hid me away.
Right. To learn the lessons that you needed to learn to hear his voice even that much more.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I'm so grateful to his will was freedom and healing, wholeness, all those things from the very beginning. But his way was specific to what I needed.
Right.
A journey. I needed a journey to come to know him, to build trust, to understand the word, to heed his voice. And I needed a journey that I wasn't going to be exploited on again for the use of a ministry.
Right.
And that's shaped even now how I approach ministry.
Right.
With the work that we do with You Are Worthy. So, yeah, just really kind of him to know the path each person needs. And we aren't robots.
No, and each person is unique and different in what they need. Mom's story is different than mine. Mine's story is different than Sharice's. So, I mean, we all have similar backgrounds on parts of it, but none of us have walked in each other's shoes. And what works for me might not work for Sharice or might not work for Mom, you know. So he's an individual God.
Absolutely.
He is your God.
Personal
he is
Savior.
Absolutely. Yeah. He is your Savior. Nobody else's. And what he tells you is different than what he might tell somebody else or what path they need to walk.
Because some of us might have, seen her in the place that she was at in that environment and been more like, why aren't you going here? Why aren't you
Right.
going here? Why aren't you, seeking a different worship environment for you to
Right.
get delivered?
Well, and we've even teased on the show some, that people have a word from the Lord for you.
Right.
And it's like, well, the Lord hasn't told
Why didn't
me
he
that
tell me
though.
first?
I mean, sometimes, yes, it's confirmation. So I'm not knocking that at all,
Right.
because sometimes that's what you need to get you that last push over the edge, because it's already what you're struggling with. And then they come in and say, hey, the Lord told me to tell you this.
Right.
And then that's the confirmation that you already needed. But when it comes out of left field and they say, oh, we really feel like the Lord has a word for you and that you need to teach Sunday school. Well, maybe that's
Right.
not my strength. Why would the Lord put me teaching Sunday school when that's not anything that I'm really good at?
Right.
So that's why we always encourage our listeners, to have that relationship. He is your God.
Absolutely.
He is your Savior. Have that relationship with Him so that then you can hear His voice.
Absolutely.
So I think that's
Having
just
said that,
incredible.
Having said that, I do want to add this caveat to that, in that sometimes he will ask you to do things that are not comfortable.
Oh,
because
absolutely.
He teaches you what there's so much that you can learn by doing
Oh, absolutely.
what you're not called to do.
Right.
Kind of hones you in. I know, because I've been there a couple of times.
Yeah, no kidding.
And it's been totally on the tail end of, okay, Lord, what would you have me do? And then this thing. And it's like, okay, I didn't see that coming, but I'll do it.
Right.
And then after I'm in there for a while and I learn all of these things I would never have known.
Right.
And it really actually set me up and better prepared me for what he
The
really
next
wanted me
step.
to do.
Right.
And it's because sometimes in order to do what you got to do, you got to know what they know in order
Right.
to understand the full picture. So as a caveat, but I know what you're talking about are those people who want to speak God into you because they want you to do something.
Exactly.
Manipulate the
That's
situation in
manipulative.
their benefit.
Yeah.
And I've had people do that to me
And
too.
that's more of what I'm talking about, because we've also said that up here is like,
Yes.
we do it afraid.
Right.
Yeah.
We do it afraid because you don't always know what's coming, but you do it anyways because that's what the Lord has told you to do.
Right.
It's not because of what
Right.
Aunt Bertha told you to do. It's
Right.
because you felt like, okay, this might not be where I'm supposed to be, but I feel like the Lord is telling me to do that. So that's a little bit of a
Right.
different scenario. But anyways,
It's so real though. They at the church they needed volunteers for children's church, and they didn't have a curriculum. So I said, "Oh, I'll write that." I had no clue what was it in the Bible. So how did the Lord have me? Because He said, "Do it." And so I started writing lessons for preschool to sixth graders every
wow.
week, and that's how I learned the Bible. Was instead of going and buying a curriculum and
Right.
saying, let's do this, I wrote lessons for every group,
wow.
not knowing that the Lord was teaching me so much, including that I should never lead worship or be in charge of crafts. I learned that in that season. But I love to teach and I love to write but it stretched me so far because I was like, are you crazy? And they, of course, were like, no, if you say yes, we need you. Like, it's
Right.
kids' church.
Wow.
So, and I had oversight and help, but just so many of those things, our yes means so much more than we realize, even
Yes.
in the comfort or the lack of it. So,
Absolutely.
For sure.
That's
Good word.
that's a very good word, and we've talked about that quite a few times.
Yeah.
Because your yes is so important,
yeah.
so important.
Yeah.
It changes everything. As I was doing that, I ran into people that were broken just in my day-to-day life as I came out of the bathtub for the first time in so many years, so to
Right.
speak. I was crossing paths with people that were broken, like I was broken, or maybe their brokenness looked different. And they'd be like, well, you seem to be better than where you said you came from. Because I go, oh, I understand. And say, I don't have any answers. I can't find my way out of a paper bag. Let's just go to Him. And that's that personal place I
Yes.
think we lose sight of so often in ministry.
Absolutely.
Is our experience becomes our hindrance because we think we know what we need or what others need. And we got all the things done, but probably not in all the best ways. It was very messy. As two broken people came together and said, Jesus, tell us what to do, and started working in deliverance and healing and mentoring. in that season, he taught me he's the answer.
Yeah.
Not where I'd walked, not where I was going to walk. It was him being the answers. Just seeing the Lord was more than just for me.
Yeah.
Built trust in me and accelerated my healing journey. That is, I watched him be personal and specific to others and didn't just repeat what he told me, but said, let's ask him. It changed things. Changed things for people that have been in church their whole lives.
Oh,
It
yeah.
changed things for people that were just showing up out of
Yeah.
the pit
Right.
like me. And it changed things for people still in the pit at that time. So our yes, in the uncomfortable, in the I'm not qualified, in
Right.
the there is no chance you want me to do anything in your name. There is no chance. And the Lord's like, just do the thing. Okay. Just do the thing.
do the
So,
thing.
yeah. Just do what he says. He's trustworthy and he doesn't set us up to fail, although success rarely looks like what we would expect it to.
Exactly.
Right,
Exactly. That's an important thing to remember for sure.
Yeah.
Is that it doesn't always look the way that we think that it should
No,
or that
the
we want it to.
Yeah. Brochure lied.
Yeah, brochure lied. It doesn't always look that way.
No.
Definitely not.
So we are going to be coming back next week and expanding even more on her ministry and how that came about from her incredible testimony. You do not want to miss next week because it's going to be just as powerful as this one is. So we're praying for you and that God will hear your heart and help you figure out what it is that you need. Maybe you need deliverance. And that's what we're going to be talking about even more of next week. So please join us next week in the Simply His Coffee Shop.